We're about to be live on YouTube. I'm gonna mute everybody just in case they're not muted. Yep, you heard that too, didn't you? All right, participants, I'll do this. All right, excellent. We are live on YouTube. I'm gonna put us live on Twitter. We are going to be live on, and we are live on Twitter. And now we shall be live on Instagram in 30 seconds, live on Instagram. Bam. It's a wonderful day today. And it has been a very, very eventful day too. How are you feeling about all that, Justin?
It's fantastic. I think a busy day is a good day. We've been in a bunch of calls, bunch of Twitter spaces, some big moves happening, lots of good connections being made. That's fantastic, if you ask me. How about
Beautiful.
yourself? How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling like today has been like 1 week's worth of activities in one moment. I made that video. I don't know who saw it or didn't see it, but it's in the Discord, the new series of OSIS, or this week at OSIS, talking about the various goals. And I feel like we just completely outdid ourselves this week with all the activity, because I didn't even expect, instead of just a partnership announcement, we like literally fully listed on a DEX. Like it was like one step further, and that was with Yellow this morning, 4 hours ago officially. Now Yellow is going to be doing something that is going to be a part of our next week's update, which I'm going to be releasing on Sunday, talking about this week at OSIS. And they're going to be doing a trading competition in in their exchange, where they're bringing like several thousand new users into the platform. We're going to be meeting OSIS, and we're probably going to literally double in holders next week or in the next couple of weeks as a result. But yeah, more updates on that then. But overall, I feel great. I feel good about all the activity. We had one Twitter space earlier today too. We were officially inaugurated, thanks to Justin. We are inaugurated as like an official member of the Polygon community. And so Polygon put us on their podcast today called The Aggregated, where OSIS is just one of these main speakers on the platform.
Yo, we followed them and they followed us in like 1 minute after. They were like watching.
Oh, Polygon, yeah.
Yeah, like click follow. And they're like, hey.
Yeah, I was literally just talking to the guys. That's why. Yeah. So there we go. We did this with Polygon too. We're doing a lot of this. Justin's out here bringing hands together. So it's been a really, really good day. The two partnership announcements were huge. The Polygon one is the handshake was the secret one because it was a follow, and we'll let people find that one out for themselves after this live stream. But not to take too much of the time up in the introduction here. This is Jalal Ibrahimi, one of the co-founders at OSIS. I've got my co-host here, our chief marketing officer, our resident Clark Kent, our friendly neighborhood trader, Justin Francisco. I hope you like that intro.
And it's fantastic. I appreciate that.
And we are back with another episode. This is episode 2 of OSIS University. Today's going to be what I'm calling the episode unofficially Origin Story. Today will be led by Justin. I'm going to be going back and forth with them a little bit too, doing that same back and forth conversational but serious format that we've got going on. We're going to explore a few different things today, though, with the formatting of everything, and we would love to get everyone's feedback. So please drop comments. We are live on different platforms too. So I see people in all of the other platforms, including YouTube and Twitter as well. Twitter normally gets up to like over 50, 60 people in the next probably 10, 15 minutes. But yeah, so everybody that's listening to this, please, as we go, drop your feedback, drop your questions, whatever you want, and we will continue from there. So without further ado, I shall hand the microphone over to Justin.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that amazing intro. I don't know if I've ever had a better one than that, so that's fantastic. Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope that you're very excited for this episode of OSIS U. Today we're going to be doing some time traveling. I'm going to take us back in history. We're going to be learning about history, how money works, Bitcoin, and the context for the greatest transfer of wealth that we are currently in the midst of right now. So first thing I'd like to do is explore Bitcoin and how that got created, and what was the reason that it did get created. So we need to go back to the year of 2008, and I'm sure that you all remember the financial crash that happened at that time. So basically what happened was there was a large financial institution called Lehman Brothers, and what happened was they went bankrupt. And that was the first domino that fell that kicked off this amazingly horrible domino effect where so many other financial institutions went bankrupt as well. And really the main problem with that was that a lot of regular people lost their money. So what happened there? Who was Lehman Brothers? They were a financial institution. They did trading. They held people's money. And what they were doing is they were giving out loans to people who couldn't afford to pay back that money. These were called subprime mortgages. And they were using their customer funds, as most banks do, to give out these loans. And because they were getting greedy, really, that's what it comes down to. They gave out these loans to people who couldn't afford to pay them back, and it created this massive bubble. Everyone was out there buying houses. I'm not sure if you guys saw the movie The Big Short, but that sort of covered the history there. And people started to notice that a bubble was occurring, and they were getting afraid. They were like, is my money really safe? And they went to these banks and they tried to pull out their money and they couldn't. And that caused this massive crash. Um, and then the government had a response to that. And the government said, okay, well, these banks are too big to fail. We can't allow that to happen. So they used $700 billion to purchase the assets off of these banks and bail them out, essentially. They didn't allow them to fail. Like, really, you should allow these things to fail if they're acting that way, acting greedy and basically ruining the lives of regular people. But the government said, no, we're actually going to support this. And so everybody got really upset. You know, you're using our taxpayer money to bail out these failing institutions. That's horrible. And Jalal's pulling up a little graphic right now. So yeah, take a look at that. And basically what this was, I think, in my opinion, this was the catalyst to really a lot of people waking up to the loss of trust in public institutions. You know, some people lost money and that's their whole livelihood. People's lives are ruined. And the government said, we're going to bail these people out. So the government's supporting that. And I think in my mind as well, that makes me lose trust in these government institutions we're supposed to rely on. And this is really the start of a new trend away from fiat. And the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, was around at that time. He saw these things happening, and he or they could have been a group of people. It's an anonymous person. Satoshi Nakamoto is just a name that this person or group gave to themselves. And this person or group came out and released a white paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And this white paper outlined basically the technical framework for Bitcoin and how it should work. So that was what launched Bitcoin. I mean, it came out exactly as a consequence of that financial crash and the loss of trust that people were having in government. And basically the idea behind Bitcoin was to create a currency that's free from government control so that this could never happen again. This should never happen again. People's lives were absolutely ruined. A couple of key points around Bitcoin and what makes it so interesting is that it has a fixed supply. Oh, and Jalal's pulling up Satoshi Nakamoto right here. This is actually a funny story. There's actually a man in Japan named Satoshi Nakamoto, and when Bitcoin started picking up steam, people were interviewing this person saying, oh, you're the creator of Bitcoin. And he had to continually go on conferences and say, no, I'm not the creator. Please stop bothering me. I'm just a humble salaryman. Like, this is not me. You can see him right there. He's showing his ID and things like that. But yeah, we still to this day don't know who the creator is. It's certainly not that man. There's been people who've come along claiming to be the creator, such as Craig White, but you know, courts recently ruled that he's not. He was lying. But to go back to a couple of key points around Bitcoin and really what makes that a great foundational starting point for this revolution, it addresses a number of the problems that fiat currency have. And fiat currency is the name that we give to money that is created out of central banks. They can have their supply changed, increased. The money is always printed with these fiat currencies. They're devalued through inflation that way. And they're always run by central bankers who try to manipulate things, whether that's interest rates or the amount of currency in circulation to try and prop it up and make it function a certain way. It requires a lot of tinkering, and it's, I don't think, very efficient at all. And it's very subject to human corruption, as we all saw from the 2008 crash. So Bitcoin addresses these problems. It has a fixed supply of 21 million coins, and that's based on math. That can't change, that can't be updated. And it's a trustless system that's powered by blockchain technology. And I'm sure that we're all familiar with the term of blockchain. I'm going to get into that a little bit later, get into some of the details on how that really works. But it's basically designed to be deflationary, unlike fiat currency, and it's designed to be outside of the realm of a centralized group of people's control. All transactions on Bitcoin are recorded in a public ledger, that is the blockchain, and that's something that anyone can verify. That is the role of the node users, the node runners and operators on the Bitcoin network. They are constantly checking the data and making sure that everything is running correctly, and they're always communicating that, creating this decentralized system. Transactions are immutable. I'm sure that you might have heard this word around, and basically what that means is they can't be altered or reversed. In the traditional banking system, that can be the case, actually. Like, if you are a victim of fraud and maybe you have money taken out of your account, then that transaction can actually be reversed and you can have your money back in your account. And maybe that's one benefit of the traditional system. But the thing with this new system is it's a system of empowerment of the individual. And so if you're educated, you really can't be frauded in that way. Jalal just pulled up another fantastic graphic here. This is exactly the problem with inflation. You see the purchasing power that you could have in 1928 versus 2017? That's due to inflation. I'm sure you all know, but let's say you go to a McDonald's. This actually happened to me recently. I went to a McDonald's and I haven't been there. I don't go too often, but I recently went and it was like $40 for 2 meals. I was absolutely blown away. I remember myself when I was younger, I always used to go and buy 3 cheeseburgers at McDonald's for $5. This is when I was like way back in school. And nowadays you can't do that anymore. That's because of inflation. That's because the money supply is constantly being increased by central banks, and companies have to adjust their prices as a result. And actually, there's like a secondary effect of inflation where companies increase their prices even further to even further compensate for the inflation. It just creates this spiral of out of control pricing and can often lead to situations called hyperinflation. There's a number of countries in the world that have faced this unfortunate thing. Venezuela is one of them, where essentially every single day, the price of everyday goods and services are updated because that's how fast the money is losing value. So this is, I would say, a central evil of fiat that I'm very excited, I think is going away, going the way of the dodo bird, due to this great financial revolution that was really kicked off by Bitcoin. So what I'd like to do next, now that we've kind of talked about the context around Bitcoin and how it got created, and some of the issues with the traditional system that Bitcoin and crypto is trying to address, now I'd like to discuss what is money itself. What is money? I mean, have people ever asked themselves this question? Money is not fiat. Fiat is just one version of it. Really, we have to get one level deeper. Money is a medium of exchange. So it facilitates trade by eliminating the inefficiencies of barter. That was the very first system that humans used to transact with each other. I would have 3 chickens, you would have 2 goats, and we would need to have this great discussion about what is the value of 1 goat per chicken. Horribly inefficient, and often would lead to so many situations where, let's say I don't have 3 chickens on me right now and I still want to buy a goat. Like, how do I transport these chickens? It's impossible, really. It's really difficult to build a highly sophisticated society on a system like that. So humans invented stand-ins for that. And one of the first stand-ins was shells, and people would use that to represent value. So money is a medium of exchange, first and foremost. Secondarily, it's a store of value. So we take the value of a chicken or whatever it is that you want to transact, and we boil that down into some amount of shells or shekels, whatever you want to use as your medium of exchange. So it's a medium of exchange, a store of value, and also a unit of account. So that means it's a common measure for valuing goods and services. And that means, let's say we all agree that a hamburger is $5. That's what that means. So basically, after we had a barter system, we had a commodity system. So we were talking about things like shells and things like that. But really, the height of that system was by using things like gold and silver. So currencies used to be actually backed by gold. The US dollar was previously backed by gold. And Then in the 70s, actually, I believe it was Nixon, he took the US dollar off the gold standard. And that's what really kicked off inflation, because no longer did you have to have your dollars backed by actual gold, a real thing in the physical world. Now dollars weren't based on anything, really. I mean, other than the military might of the US. But, that's not a real firm backing like gold is. And so that's what led to the creation of what we call fiat currency. It's not backed by anything. It just relies on the trust of the issuing authority. You have to trust the government that that money is worth what they say. And as we know, the government is not particularly trustworthy in that way. Jalal just pulled up a great little graphic here, the history of money. So in 770 BC, coins were first created in China. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. Then China created a system of paper money, and so on and so forth until we rise to where we are today, where we have tons of inflation, tons of problems, yet a fantastic revolution underway that I think we can all feel some level of hope in. So as I discussed before, the real problem with fiat is inflation and reliance on centralized groups. One thing I would like to touch on, actually, is the concept of money being evil. I know people have this thought in their minds, oh, money's the root of all evil. I would like to challenge that right here now. I don't think money is the root of all evil. I think money is just simply a tool, like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to beat someone up. That's not the hammer's fault. That's the human's fault, right? And I mean, Jalal, you tell me, have you ever experienced people saying that around you? Like, money's the root of all evil. They're always complaining about it. Have you ever experienced things like that?
Particularly in Canada, yes.
Mm.
But when you go to the United States, people feel that way often, but capitalism is a very powerful thing because a lot of people see money as their means of freedom. And it's a very interesting question. It is a really interesting question. What do you normally get from people? Why do people tell you that money is the root of all evil?
You know what? That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. People usually tell me that money is the root of evil because they haven't had much success with it. That's my understanding of it, right? Like, they are maybe not saving as much as they could. They're not earning as much as they'd like, and so they say, "Oh well, you know what? The problem is money itself." And I don't think that's the case. I think the real problem here is the fact that currently we have a fiat system, and that system leads to money devaluing over time and basically everyone's life getting worse over time, except for the very top percentage of people. And so I think people rightly have problem with that system, but it's not that money is the problem, it's that human corruption is the problem. That would be my take on that particular thing. And Bitcoin essentially removes that human corruption out of the equation at all, so that we can actually have a functional money. And then hopefully I would hope that people stop feeling that money is the root of all evil, so that they can empower themselves and actually start acquiring some money. Like, I've even hung out with people who try to spend all their money because they thought that. They literally thought money's the root of all evil, so I'm gonna spend it all, not save it and not invest. And I'm just like, why? Don't do that, please. Save your money, invest your money, make your life better. That's what I encourage people to do. And that's why I'm very excited about this revolution that Bitcoin really kicked off here. So we've gone through the journey, the context so far of the 2008 crash, the loss of public trust in institutions, the spark that kicked off this revolution, that is Bitcoin, created by the anonymous creator Satoshi Nakamoto. We've discussed what is money and why is it useful? Why did humans even invent money in the first place? And that money is not evil, that the real evil is the system that we currently have. So I think we need to dive further in now and really explore what is this amazing new technology that we are really, just beginning to really fully explore and integrate into our system. And that is the technology that Bitcoin is based on, blockchain. And I'm really framing this whole discussion in terms of Bitcoin because that's the first thing that really kicked this all off. But I mean, this applies to all sorts of blockchain cryptocurrencies, but I'm just going to continue referring to mainly Bitcoin just to keep us on track there. So as I said before, blockchain is a decentralized ledger that records transactions across many computers. It's a decentralized network that does not require a centralized person. There are nodes that the network utilizes. Each node has a copy of the whole ledger. So every person here in this call, you can run a Bitcoin node if you want to, and you can verify every transaction that's occurring on the Bitcoin blockchain. I personally run a node myself. And this, this is an empowering thing. That means you have the tools of the financial revolution that is Bitcoin in your own hands It's no longer in the hands of someone else. And this is an interesting fact that I think a lot of people don't know, that actually transactions are verified by consensus among the nodes. So 51% of the nodes have to agree, and then that transaction is verified. There's been some talk from people about a potential 51% attack, which is where, let's say, some nefarious entity would, I don't know, try and take over 51% of the network. It really can't happen. It would be so extremely expensive. They would just be better off buying Bitcoin and holding, and their money would be worth more. And another thing as well, with this 51% attack, if that were to happen, the remainder of the nodes would create a split off of that point, and those people would be blacklisted. So all of their money would be essentially like wasted on that. Another really key point that you need to understand when it comes to understanding the blockchain is actually the blocks and the chain. The blocks are where the transaction list is stored. Think of it like an Excel sheet. That's really all it is. It's a list of transactions. My money is going to you, your money is going to someone else, so on and so forth. And those are linked together cryptographically in unique ways via a system called hashing. And so these blocks are broken down into particular mathematical things that are then injected into the top of the next block so that they're all linked together, and we can verify all the way back in history, all the way back into 2009, that each of these blocks is legitimate and verified by everybody in the network and powered by the miners. So the real benefit of blockchain is security, transparency, and immutability. So I'm going to go through each of those one at a time. And anyone in the comments, feel free to let me know if I'm going too fast or if you want me to break anything down a little further. And Jalal as well. I mean, if anything is jumping out at you that's too confusing or anything like, shocking, I know that you already know all about all of this, but you let me know as well. So
Great.
those are the three.
Let's do a speed round at each intersection before moving on to like new topics.
Okay.
So for this one just now, you explained blockchain. We actually did this in episode 1 or even the pre-episode 1. I want to do a speed round on terminology just for people to get caught up and understand what you were talking about, and they can scroll back in the video too later on. What do you mean by node? You said that you also participate and you are a node as well. What is node in simplest terms?
Sure. So there are two aspects to powering the Bitcoin network. There are nodes and there are miners, okay? So nodes are people who have the whole list of Bitcoin, the entire blockchain stored on a hard drive. And what they do is they run the Bitcoin software, and that Bitcoin software just links up with every other node and verifies, does my node match your node? Does your node match this node and that node? Do all of the nodes agree on the list of transactions? If at least 51% agree, then we're all good. We're all in agreement. We can keep moving forward on this blockchain. That's what a node is. It's one little part of the decentralized network that links up with all of the other various parts or nodes to verify that we're all on the same page, that we all have a consensus about the transactions and where we're at with these transactions.
So in a sense, you and millions of other people are independent accountants, and y'all are like, yes, the numbers make sense.
Yep, I agree. You agree. We all agree. Fantastic.
Okay, so that's how we can have a money system that isn't controlled by an individual, and that's how we can have a transparent money system. It's like all the transactions, all the activity, all the money is moving in plain view. So we got a node. You can consider a node in this context of the blockchain as kind of like an independent accountant, but he's not doing any work. He just has his system keeping a record of everything that's legit.
The work that I'm doing as a node operator is simply giving hard drive space to the blockchain. I use my hard drive to store the entire blockchain. It's around 400 gigabytes now, and that's my contribution to the network. And then, so we talked about nodes. They're the independent verifiers that everything is good, that we're all in agreement, that all the transactions make sense together. And then there's the other aspect, that's miners. And the miners are the ones who supply the proof of work. This is another like Bitcoin term. And they supply the computing power. So nodes supply the hard drive space for the blockchain, and miners supply the processing power to solve the complicated mathematical equations that keep the network secure. So they're the ones who enable the block to go from one block to the next block. They take a block, package it up. Once that secret code is found by the extreme amount of computing power in the network, the next block is then opened up for new transactions. So miners are like the security, the police force, you could say.
Cool. Cool. Great explanation.
Fantastic.
Another term that you used was consensus. What is consensus in simple terms? Coming
Consensus
to
is
consensus.
simply the agreement of everybody or vast majority of people in any system that they all agree on the same thing. That's what a consensus is.
So
We all have a consensus, for example, that the sky is blue. Nobody doubts that unless you're colorblind, but that's sort of outside of the realm of, consensus, right? Consensus
minority.
requires most of the people, 90% of the people to agree.
Right. And so when you said that as long as 51% of the nodes or we'll call them the accountants on the blockchain network or the Bitcoin network, as long as they're all in agreement or 51% are in agreement on a certain list of this is the truth, then we have consensus. The majority.
Yep, and the network keeps moving forward. If ever that stopped being the case, maybe the network would pause, but it's never happened, not in entire Bitcoin history. And majority of the time, almost all the time, 99% of the nodes agree. So we've never gotten anywhere close to a 51% attack. And there's a lot of money in the Bitcoin network. It's a $2 trillion network. If there was a hacker out there who was able to hack the network, they would have $2 trillion in their pocket. I think that's the best case for Bitcoin security. If it was hackable, it would have been done. I mean, who wouldn't like to have another $2 trillion?
Right. And not just $2 trillion, just holding $2 trillion. They would have to actively like become the 51%. Like they would have to match and overcome all the rest of the accountants in the world. They would have to be they would have to become the resounding voice of no, this is the real truth. And
Yes.
that's crazy because there's too many millions of people on Earth that are already in consensus with the truth. So if someone tried to hack Bitcoin, they'd have to bring a whole not even an army, like nations and nations of people to hack
They'd have
and
to bring, literally, the math is this. They would have to have, I think it's 60 billion Googles. Okay, so think about all the computing power that Google has. They'd have to have 60 billion Googles across 60 billion Earths.
dude.
You're not doing that. Like, nobody's doing that.
So okay, so no, it's quite literally impossible. It's not even $2 trillion does not even get you 1% of the way there. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. And Federico asked in the chat, so is 51% the minimum or baseline for validation? Yes, 51% is the minimum. We've never gotten there. It's always like 99%. Everybody always like agrees that we're not getting there. I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah. So we're safe. Majority rules, basically. In the blockchain world, majority rules.
Fantastic, absolutely. So yeah, we just covered the three basic tenets for why blockchain is fantastic. So that is security, transparency, and immutability. These are the three things that make up the amazing qualities of a blockchain. Okay, so now I would like to discuss sort of, that spark happened. This spark created a wildfire. Bitcoin really kicked this whole thing off, but it didn't stop there. Right after Bitcoin was made, a couple years went by, and then Vitalik Buterin invented something called Ethereum, and that's what introduced smart contracts to this whole world of cryptocurrency. Ethereum was the first altcoin. And then after Ethereum, someone came along and created Litecoin. And that was an attempt to improve the transaction speed and efficiency of the Bitcoin network. Actually, just yesterday, the Ethereum ETF was approved in the United States, and that was a fantastically bullish moment for the entire industry, regardless of your stance on Ethereum and whether you're a holder or not. It adds legitimacy to the whole space. But you'll notice that there's not much discussion around Litecoin anymore. And why is that? Okay, so Bitcoin is structured in a particular way, the block sizes are a particular way, and the amount of time it takes on average to fill a block is a particular way as well. That is, I would say, basically perfectly optimized to allow the system to function like well, but also not be open to like hacking or anything like that. Litecoin, on the other hand, was an attempt to speed the network up, and it was clearly far less successful. Okay, so we have Bitcoin that came along and really kicked off this revolution. Ethereum came next, and then the altcoin explosion, right? So I think what we're discussing here is really a trend that we're all now calling DeFi. So what is DeFi? It's decentralized finance. And these are all kinds of platforms now that are operating in the crypto space that allow anything from lending to borrowing, trading, and these are all things that happen now without traditional banks. Historically, Bitcoin was something that was transacted like peer to peer, person to person. And then once DeFi really started picking up, now you can obviously, there's exchanges everywhere, there's all kinds of DeFi exchanges, and the space is a lot more mature. So there's far less like peer to peer trading. And if someone doesn't know what peer to peer means, it just means person to person. So I would have to go to Jalal, let's say, and say, hey, Jalal, I've got $100. Can you give me $100 of Bitcoin? That really doesn't need to happen anymore because of the invention of DeFi. And this is really like where the whole thing kind of blossoms out from here. We're going beyond currency now. Bitcoin is a really solid base layer of currency. It's like digital gold. That's the way I best think about it. And now we're kind of blossoming out beyond just currency, and we're looking at things like supply chain management, like things like that. Potential uses in healthcare or secure and transparent medical records, right? Like these are things that are going beyond the realm of currency now. And that's really where this revolution is continuing to go. It's continuing to blossom out from there. And
Well,
people even suggested, oh, go ahead.
Justin, you mentioned something earlier that I feel like is a fundamental piece of how this thing can even blossom in the first place. You started this segment talking about Ethereum, and you said that Ethereum created smart contracts. How is that relevant? What even is this smart contract? We all know what a contract is, right? Like an agreement, a legal agreement where two parties have terms and they come together and they do some kind of business or some kind of negotiation in a transaction. What is it? What does smart contract mean? How does that have anything to do with Bitcoin in the first place?
Fantastic. Oh, that's a great question. I'm embarrassed that I glossed over that one a little bit. But basically, a smart contract is a programmable contract that executes itself based on the agreement of the person who made the code and the person who's now interacting with it. So it doesn't require a human being after the fact to be a middleman to engage that contract. For example, in the traditional system, let's say Jalal and I sign a contract. Okay, Jalal, this contract says that I will give you 100 apples on May 25th. Okay, so that actually requires me to go and do that and like stand up for that contract and actually make sure it happens. And it requires you as well. You need to say like, hey, I'm holding you to your word. Bring me my 100 apples. Where are they? You're late. That doesn't happen with smart contracts. It just happens. It's like powered by computing code. There's no one who needs to um, be trusted anymore. It's a trustless system. It's a
Automatic.
trustless way of engaging in the new way of doing business, really, with contracts.
Digitizing business.
Yes, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked that one. And
Sweet.
smart contracts really open up all sorts of possibilities. I mean, there's digital voting. There's so many DAOs now, decentralized autonomous organizations that are powered by people. It's like the new form of democracy almost. It's a very interesting thing that this revolution is all kind of like blossoming out into. Actually, a key example of this is West Virginia's pilot blockchain voting for overseas military personnel. So, I mean, all sorts of institutions are using this now, like the military, hospitals. It's really embedding itself into the world. So really the key points about smart contracts are that they automatically enforce and execute agreements when predefined conditions are met. That's really the number one thing to understand. And it's got all kinds of applications across everything from real estate to insurance and legal agreements. So yeah, basically we've covered now the 2008 financial crisis, the creation of Bitcoin, the blossoming of altcoins, and really now this amazing tidal wave, this new trend that's happening, which is essentially the digitization of the entire world. The world is moving from old, slow systems that require trust to new, exceptionally fast systems that don't require any trust at all. The world is digitizing now, and actually, amazingly, that I get to be part of this at OSIS. We plan on eating a large piece of that pie as well. OSIS is allowing now everybody to engage with these smart contracts and create tokens of their own. You don't need the technical knowledge anymore to create these very complicated things. Now everybody can kind of get involved, and the revolution can really touch for every single person.
Hey, Justin, when was the first time you interacted with a smart contract? And what was it?
The first time I interacted with a smart contract, I think, so basically I've been in crypto now since around 2018, 2019, and I'll just walk you through this whole sort of story of mine. I first got into it and I got into Bitcoin and then I got into Ethereum. And and actually the NFT craze was happening at that time as well. And so I'd say the first time I ever interacted with a smart contract was during the NFT cycle, the real like hype of NFTs getting created last time. And I bought, I forget what it was like this picture of like a robot. And I did that via smart contract online. So I'd say it was through NFTs.
What was the experience like when you did the transaction? When you interacted?
It was a little scary at first, to be honest, because I was like, okay, I'm sending money to this thing. Is it gonna work? Is it gonna happen? And then it did, and it was just like magic. It happened in a number of seconds, really. And I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. And then actually from there, my mind really started to like blossom about all the potential applications for these smart contracts. And voting was my number one first thought. I was like, voting has to be done this way from now on. Like, why do we go with a piece of paper, write something, scribble in, put it in a box, and then people like they count it and they like tell other people via the phone like what they counted? Like, what? That's crazy. So
There's room for error.
there is room for error with the old human system, and there is not room for error when a smart contract is created and then verified to be without error because you can check it beforehand. And that's
Okay,
the function of groups that audit various projects to verify their security and the fact that the contract is going to do what the person says it's going to do.
right. Now, okay, now I have another question for you. Normally people, when they run into something, a technology, it's usually pretty mature. It's usually something that like, you heard it from a friend and another friend and another friend, and they're all using it,
Mhm.
kind of like movies. Um, this is a little bit different for a lot of people because people heard about Bitcoin way early. Basically everyone, if you're not living under a rock, you've heard of Bitcoin. But not many people have heard of smart contracts and really actually the word blockchain and the technology aspect behind it.
True. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear in the chat. Has anyone here, like, I mean, I hope you guys have used some smart contracts, but has the larger world? I don't think so. I mean, I think right now, even Bitcoin itself is still something people look at with some skepticism because I think we are still fairly early. And then smart contracts are like, I don't even think people have heard the term. When I would talk to some of my friends, I'm sure they would not know what that is.
Well, why do you think that is? Why has everyone heard of Bitcoin, but they haven't actually heard of like the applications of the blockchain?
That's a good question. Why have people heard of Bitcoin but not the applications of blockchain? I think that most people get their information from the news a lot of the time, and I think the news is a bit slow as well. I mean, I used to work in the news, and I mean it's a very slow industry, and so Bitcoin was the first thing that really came along and started making waves. They're still like back there, they're still on that timeline, and only now are things sort of picking up that way with the ETF that was approved yesterday for Ethereum. I think things will probably change. People will probably start knowing what smart contracts are years and years after the fact. And I wanted to touch upon also something you said, the fact that this is still like a relatively like, I don't know, not necessarily mature industry, right? You were saying people tend to come across technologies when they're already mature. And that reminded me of like when I first came across iPhones. I had the second or third iPhone, and by then it's like smartphones are a deeply mature industry. And yet even still people were like, oh, smartphones, I'm not sure about them. Like, are they here to stay and things like that. In fact, when Steve Jobs was first pitching the iPhone to people, they didn't even like it. That's mind blowing to me. Like he had to really try to get the iPhone to market. It almost didn't happen because people were very skeptical about the creation of this like new smartphone. They were like, "There's no buttons on it. I don't recognize it. It's unfamiliar. It's scary." And now look, I mean, we only have the black rectangles. We don't even have those old phones that like slide and flip around and do all that sort of stuff. And so basically, the core message here is I think that I mean, human beings naturally are sort of resistant to change, and that makes some sense. That does. I think there's value in relying on traditional thoughts and traditional ways of doing things. But I do believe also humans are very flexible, and when they're given enough information and data, and when enough of the people around them start to talk about something as well and achieve a consensus, like we talked about before, then things really start to move forward and really like pick up from there. And that's why you sort of see this chart. I don't know if you can pull this one up. It's like the early adopters, the laggers, and then like the late adopters. It kind of looks like this like bell curve sort of chart. And that's just really as a result of human psychology. There's new technologies that are invented. Let's say it's fire, for example. Fire gets invented. People are scared. Oh, what is that? Oh, I can cook meat. Oh, I've never had cooked meat before. You've had cooked meat? Let me try some. And then you do try some. You're like, this is fantastic. Oh my God, I've got to tell everybody about this. And then you have the same sort of thing happening on and on until around 51% of the population is convinced. And then now, I mean, fire's obvious. Oh, it's so obvious. Fire's the best thing ever. Of course. I always knew that. That's sort of how it always goes. This is exactly the one.
You know, it's very interesting how math works. A lot of people think humans created math, but it's like, no, math is like nature. And it's
Yeah.
interesting how humans ourselves, human behavior can be categorized. Like this is statistics, and you could probably run these numbers a million times over for a million different things in a million different scenarios, and it's still going to fall into roughly the same curve.
Yes,
So
it absolutely is. The only difference is if you look at now the adoption rate of various technologies, the adoption rate is picking up exponentially because people are getting more used to these new technologies. But the thing is, it still looks like this, just really squished in
just
now.
just
Like
fast.
if you look at the adoption rate of Chat GPT, it was like a straight line up almost. It's crazy because
Yeah, right
that,
here.
yeah, that thing got invented and then it's like bang, the next day everybody's using it to do their work for them. Like but
Yeah,
yet still there were the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and then the laggers. It just happened so fast.
interesting. So where would you put us in the cycle right now with Web3? Not from an investment perspective,
Mhm.
but adopters actually using the technology and using and interacting with smart contracts, doing Web3 transactions. Where would you put us here?
For Web3, I think we're still super early. For Bitcoin, I would say we're already in the like early, late majority area. But for Web3, I mean, like I said, I mean, I've had conversations with friends. They don't even know what a smart contract is. So I think we're still in like the early adopters phase. And for some of the even newer technologies, I mean, we're in the innovator phase. And the
Yeah,
really good thing about being in those phases is the amazing amount of upside that's left, right? Once you're in the late majority, it's like, okay, I mean, you're invested at Netflix now. Like, congratulations on your 10% per year. But if you're in the innovator phase, I mean, sky's the limit, you know? Look at Nvidia right now with AI, for example. AI is just really being talked about and kicking off. Look at that chart. It's fantastic. It's insane because AI is still a relatively new thing. Yeah, we could pull up the Nvidia chart. If you go to a greater time scale, maybe like the 5 year. Yeah, look at that. So it's like looks pretty flat, 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 and then bang, right around 2024, it's going crazy. And look at that most
last
recent
year.
line, that's like vertical. And
That's vertical. Yeah.
that's the benefit that you get from being in the innovator and the early investor stage. And that's the benefit you get from being flexible with your mindset around emerging technologies.
This thing went up 2,800% in 5 years.
Nearly a 30x increase.
Yeah, and even in the last year alone, it's 247% just because AI is going up. NVIDIA is the major supplier of chips for like processors for AI developers.
Yes. And I'd love to hear if anybody has any other questions in the chat. I mean, I'd love to dive in there.
I have a question for you. Now, going off of smart contracts, talking about smart contracts and talking about Web3. Well, first, what is Web3? Let's define that term. What would you say Web3 is? We
You
already
mean
talked about Bitcoin, we already talked about blockchain. How is that different?
So how is Web3 different from Bitcoin and blockchain? Well, in order to describe or define anything, you always need to compare and contrast with things that already exist. Web3 is the next stage of evolution of basically the internet or like the interaction between all human beings. Um, and it's the evolution of Web 2. So Web 2 is the standard internet, things like Google or Facebook, that's Web 2. Web 3 is the next layer on top of that, the next innovation. And it differs from, I mean, I don't know if Bitcoin is technically classified as Web 3. I don't think it is because it doesn't have smart contracts. It's more of just a financial instrument. Whereas Web 3 is really taking the physical world and digitizing it. Things like smart contracts, evolving upon the concept of contracts between individuals, and um, and that sort of thing.
Okay, so now everyone knows what we're talking about when we say what in Web3. Now, now that a person knows what Web3 is, and now that they know too that there are these things called smart contracts that are part of all the applications, and they're part of like the bones and the guts of what makes up this new internet, this new phase of internet, this smart contract thing. It's what makes things possible. Now, knowing about smart contracts, give everyone a little bit of a preview of why it's important for an individual to know about a smart contract today. How can they benefit from knowing this information? Would they be able to use these things to benefit themselves?
Sure. I mean, the main benefit about knowing about smart contracts today comes from the fact that you would be in the innovator or early investor stage of this new technology. And I think I've painted a pretty compelling case for why this technology is inevitable and going to continue to proliferate across the human society. And so, if that's the case, and you've heard of this concept and you don't quite know what it is yet, or maybe you do and you want to learn more, you should, because that puts you in that category of person who is most primed for the rest of the upside that's coming from these amazing technologies. That's why you should learn about this. If you learn about it, you open yourself up for the opportunity to really be ahead of the next curve. For example, let's say when Web 2 first started coming about, there was the whole .com boom because this new technology was created. The people who knew how to code on Web 2 became millionaires. And so the people who know about Web 3 during this next phase of expansion of human innovation are standing to profit maximally and also hopefully improve their lives as a result of knowing about this new technology ahead of the majority of people.
I want to add a couple more points to that too. So, the current world, the current Web3 world, we'll say the market. Here, we'll switch spotlights. I'm gonna snag the smart spotlight from you for a moment. I just push you on again.
I see you now.
Oh, sweet. So hey everybody. The current Web3 world, and I'm gonna show you actually what it looks like right now. The entire market is 2.56 trillion dollars. There we go. Market cap, $2.56 trillion. All right. It's gone up quite a bit. It went from a few billion in 2015. Get that. Get this. It was a few billion in 2015. We saw the NVIDIA chart. It went from like 5 billion to like 2,500 billion in a matter of less than 10 years. Well, even if we look a year ago, it more than doubled in a year. So $2.5 trillion. When Justin said it's growing, he really means it. And it's growing significantly to the point where, and why we were talking about this being the greatest transfer of wealth in human history, being hundreds of trillions of dollars. The way that this is going to happen is through smart contracts. Every bit of this is powered by, or almost all of it is powered by smart contracts. Every bit of the future is going to be powered by smart contracts. It is very important for people today to learn how to interact with these things, how to engage with them safely, securely, and in a way that's smart for their time, their energy, their money, and their involvement. Nobody wants to waste time, and everybody wants to make the most of what they have today for the future. And learning about smart contracts, learning about Web3, learning about things like Ethereum and Bitcoin and this market and tokenization and the future of this is going to put everybody and their families in such a good position for the future. You're going to be in the early adopter position with nothing but upside ahead of you. And it's a great position to be in.
Yes, absolutely. Like, imagine if today you didn't know how to use the internet. Like, how would you do anything? You couldn't do banking, really. You couldn't, like, it'd be hard to call people on the phone. I mean, you should understand these things because this is the next evolution of the internet. And so if you understand the internet today, you understand the value of understanding the internet and you use it every day. It's like magic. It just happens. You don't even need to like understand the way the technology works. But the fact is that the early adopters of this technology did do that work to get us to this point now where everyone can kind of just accept it as a reality, much like we accept electricity or other inventions that, people had to fight for these things to exist, and they had to fight against naysayers as well. They had to ride the ups and the downs. And now we're in a position where these things have succeeded to the point where they're just natural. It's like water existing. It's like rain. And so that's where we're headed with this industry.
Beautiful.
You're
Justin,
here now. Fantastic and good for you.
Two quick questions for you before we start to close the today's episode. Are there different degrees or variations of smart contracts, or is it just one size fits all on different blockchains or in different spaces?
Well, I mean, the various different blockchains all claim to do various different things. Like some try to be faster, some try to be more secure, some enable greater depth of capacity or capability across smart contracts. Like some interact with, I don't know, let's say you're using it in your supply chain, and that requires certain capabilities and technical aspects of that particular blockchain. So I wouldn't say it's a one size fit all sort of situation myself. Smart contracts are as varied as websites, in my opinion.
Good comparison. They are as varied as websites. Smart contracts are like any agreement. They're going to be unique to the situation that they're required in. But what makes a smart contract secure? Is it because of encryption or something else?
Smart contracts are secure, I think, primarily because of the blockchain they operate on, and so everything has to be, acceptable within the blockchain. And as long as it's verified that way, it's secure in the technical aspect. And then the thing that makes it secure from like a human aspect is people who verify the fact that that contract is doing what it says it's going to be doing. And I think the real value of what we're doing at OSIS is making it so that people don't need to have that technical knowledge to create their own tokens via smart contracts.
Beautiful. I'll add to that to say that the reason why a smart contract can be secure even beyond the technical part of it, because the technical part, there are a lot of standards and people follow the standards the same way, like Justin said, you create a website. Um, there are rules that you follow that are very, very well known. And if you follow them when creating a smart contract, well, you don't have to do it. OSIS will do it for you. We will follow, we already follow the rules. We are audited and we will deliver a good, safe, secure technical product. Now, on the social and human side of things, the way that a smart contract can be very secure is that, when you sit down with somebody and you're talking to them, me and Justin are talking, and Justin is supposed to give me 100 apples and I'm going to give him $100 in exchange on this date. We know the terms. The terms are very clear when you do a negotiation and you handshake on it. The smart contract is pre-programmed to be exactly what we said in the beginning with mathematical precision. So you can't cheat math, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You made an agreement and the contract will follow that agreement, whether you like it or not. If money comes into the contract, it will be sent to the party that it's supposed to be sent to. That's why people want to use especially in entertainment and in music, for example, why people like the idea of using smart contracts, because the artist will no longer be cheated of their percentage of the project, because the smart contract will force the issue. The money comes into the smart contract, it collects it, and it will divide it as it was agreed on in the very first place. So yeah, it's going beyond trusting the other party to do their part, and becomes a situation where the smart contract will take care of that for both people. It will keep everyone honest in that sense.
Yes,
And
it's
with
another
that being,
step away from like having to require human trust, right? Like with that 100 apples example, what if I hand over the 100 apples and then you just run away? Then I have no more apples. With the smart contract, I send in the 100 apples, you send in the $100, and it automatically just comes to us. If I sent in the apples and you didn't send the dollars, it wouldn't happen. You couldn't get your apples.
exactly, good point. The smart contract would hold the apples. A lot of people, you can look at it like an escrow. Like if there was a trusted lawyer in between a transaction, both parties pay, and then the lawyer will distribute the money. Now
Yes.
you don't even need a lawyer. You don't need a human being, because a human being can mess up. Now we have software that does it for us and does it effectively, and is proven to be like really, really, really good at that, because it costs a fraction of the cost of doing anything else. But that
Exactly.
being said, let's wrap this up. We are at the top of the hour. I think today was a great episode. Everybody drop your comments in here for, your feedback, how you felt about everything, what you thought about everything. And I will let Justin, I know you've got a conclusion in mind. I'll let you summarize everything and take a step back.
Fantastic. Well, I just first want to say again, thank you everyone for joining on the call, and thank you, Jalal, for your questions and moderating the chat. In conclusion, what did we discuss today? We discussed the 2008 financial crisis, the lack of trust that people had in the government, why Bitcoin was created, the revolution that Bitcoin started and has now been continued by the creation of smart contracts and altcoins. And really what we've fully discussed is the new trend that's coming, the digitization of the world, and how we are positioning ourselves to really be key leaders in that transition for the benefit of everyone here and everybody on the planet. That's really our main focus. And so thanks again, everybody, for joining up on the call. I hope everything was clear. If not, I mean, always drop me a DM. I'm open for questions anytime. Thanks for the participation in the chat. And thank you, everybody.